What is going on, guys? Welcome back to another video. It's Tuesday, which means it's time for a tier list Tuesday. We do a tier list every single Tuesday, and I thought because now we are about 3 months into the NHL season, as crazy as that is to say, the NHL season obviously starts in early October, I would do my updated NHL overall tier list of the league, every single team in it right now. And again, this is not just going to be me regurgitating the standings. This is how good I think these actual teams are, how good they'll be going forward. Let's just dive into it. Let's dive into it. Let's get into it. Here it is. We got Contender safely making the playoffs, battling for a spot, below average, and bad. Up first, the Anaheim Ducks. I don't think they're as bad as a San Jose or Chicago by any means, but I think you got to put them in bad. They obviously had that great start. They have been sputtering kind of since Carlson gets hurt. They've dealt with a ton of injuries. You could maybe put them in below average, but right now I'm going to go with bad just because the results haven't been there, losing a lot of close games, which young teams do. They're going to be fine long term. Right now, they're still a pretty bad team. Coyotes, battling for a spot, man. They've exceeded my expectations. I had them at around the 84, 85 point mark. It seems like they're going to be in that Western Conference battle for a spot. Ingram and Vegemelka have been one of the better goalie tandems in the entire league, have a very solid forward core. That defense still is a little bit suspect. Sean Thursey has definitely risen to the occasion, but I think they're going to be battling for a spot. If they were in the Eastern Conference, not sure they'd be battling for a spot, but the West is pretty wide open right now. Next, Bruins, got to have them in Contender, even though, again, we saw this last year, fantastic regular season, ended up shitting the bed. They're still probably going to win the Atlantic Division pretty easily, get that home ice advantage, and I think they will be able to learn from the mistakes of last year. It's going to be very interesting to see what they do at the deadline this year. They don't know their 2024 first, but I think you got to be pretty active. You got to make some moves, maybe not as much as last year, but you got to at least try to upgrade the team because this is one of their better opportunities they're going to have in terms of their core. Buffalo, below average. I was lower on this team coming into the season. I had them in the mid-80s. I had them not making the playoffs, and the goaltending hasn't really been there. Devin Levi has been much improved of late, but I still think this team is lacking in terms of their defense core after Power and Dahlin. The forward core, the bottom six, isn't quite there. You got guys like Dylan Cousins and Tage Thompson kind of taking a step back this year. JJ Petarka is playing fantastic, though, but I think they're going to need another year or two once you get a Yuri Kulich, a Savoy, a Benson, not 18 goddamn years old. This team, their core is going to be perfectly fine, but right now I'm pretty low on them. Calgary, below average, but honestly, you could put them in bad just because you know that Lindholm and Hannafin, once Lindholm, Hannafin, and Tanev get traded, they're going to be one of the worst teams in the entire league. Right now, I'll go bad, though. They're right below 500, I believe, and that's with only getting worse in terms of their eventual trades at the deadline. Markstrom's playing pretty good, but overall, it's been a disappointing season. Carolina, I think safely make the playoffs. I can't put them in the Contender because the goalie tandem has been so bad that I think that's going to hurt them in the playoffs. But the goalie tandem has been so bad that I think there's only room for improvement in terms of making the playoffs. And they still have 59% points percentage right now. They're still on pace for like 99 goddamn points with literally bottom three goaltending, maybe even the worst goaltending situation in the entire league. Freddie Anderson's going to be back in a couple weeks. They should cruise to the playoffs. It's not like they had an Edmonton-level start with their defense. They were able to keep it afloat just because they dominate possession so much and limit high-danger scoring chances and just overall shots. They're the goddamn Corsi Kings. So even with that goaltending, they're going to cruise to a playoff spot. Chicago, bad. Bedard and kind of nobody after that. Kershev's having a career year, mainly because of, he's young, but he's having his best year yet, mainly because he plays with Bedard. They have a bunch of good pieces, but they still stink. Colorado, they're my preseason cup pick, so this is a little bit biased, but I still think they're going to put it together. Right now, it's been a little bit disastrous. They've had Mikko Rantanen calling out Arturi Lekkonen's goddamn dad, Devontae's calling out other people on the team that are thinking that they're playing well. This team is still on pace for like 105, 106 goddamn points. I think they're going to be much more active at this year's deadline. Last year, their only move was like Lars Ellers for like a second or a third. I think they kind of took last year off because of obviously the Landeskog situation. That this year is going to be really where they put all the chips in again, similarly to like what they did in 2022. Columbus, bad. A lot of good young pieces, but this team stinks. Goalies stink. Defense kind of stinks. Just a stinky team. Dallas, I'm going to still go Contenders. The goaltending has not been there. Ottinger has like a 901 right now. I think that's going to improve. They definitely need to get another top four defenseman after Miro Heiskanen, and it kind of falls off pretty heavily right now. But I still think this team is going to be 105 points and come playoff time. Jason Robertson's starting to play a little bit better, so I think they're going to be in the mix. Red Wings, below average, man. It's been a rough stretch for the Red Wings ever since they're down to like 51% points percentage. And mind you, that was with a start where they won. They were like, what, like 6-1-1. So since that amazing start, they've basically been playing around 40% points percentage hockey. They're not this bad as they've been recently, but this is a mid 80s, low 80s kind of team. Even with Patrick Kane absolutely balling out, they still weren't winning games. Again, not the end of the world. I had them in that low 80s mark. I think next year's kind of their year. This was just a kind of chemistry year. They brought in a bunch of one-year deals. Some of their young guys are going to step up next year, and they're going to be fine. But right now, I'd say they're going to finish like 82 points for the most part. Oilers, should I piss some people off and put them in contenders? I'm going to have them in safely make the playoffs. I need to see more of Stuart Skinner continuing to play better. Maybe Calvin Pickard or not Rodriguez, whoever their AHL goalie is right now. If one of those guys can emerge and play consistently good, I think they are a contender. But right now, the goaltending just isn't there. Their offense is really starting to cook. They've obviously completely turned it around after starting 2-9-3 or whatever it was. They're safely going to make the playoffs, in my opinion. I think when looking at that wild card race, considering how well they've been playing of late, they're going to cruise to a wild card spot. I don't know if I'd go as bold like I did like a month ago to say they're going to pass the Canucks, because the Canucks actually have kept this up in the Kings and the Knights, but they should safely make a playoff spot. Florida, I think, is a legit contender. Right now, they're like the third best team in the entire Eastern Conference, and that's with Matthew Tkachuk putting up goddamn like 14 goal and 40 assist pace. He's playing horrendous by his standards. He's shooting like 4%, and yet they are playing very good. I think they have one of the best forward cores in the entire league. Reinhart's obviously playing fantastic. He's basically picked up the slack from Tkachuk. Evan Rodriguez was a great add. The defense core, Montour and Ekblad, aren't even playing that good right now again. And then you got guys like OEL and Forsling kind of picking up the slack, especially when those guys were out. I'm very high on Florida. Bobrovsky's been pretty solid compared to last year. It looks like some of that playoff amazing run has kind of carried into this year. He's a solid like 9-12. Stolarz has been an okay backup. I'm pretty bullish on Florida. I either had them in a wild card spot or had them missing in my preseason predictions. I think that was stupid. Florida is closer to that Presidents team, that team that won the Presidents in 2022 than the team that just barely sneaked into the playoffs last year. Last year was kind of just a mess, getting chemistry and all that. LA safely make the playoffs. I can't see them falling out of the Pacific spot, and definitely not falling out of a wild card spot. They haven't been playing as good of late, but still just such an overall deep team in terms of their forward core and defense core. Is Cam Talbot going to keep up his 924 or something? No, of course not, but this should be a 100-plus point team. Minnesota, I got them battling for a spot. Right now, I probably would pick them to make one of the wild card spots in the West. Similarly to Edmonton, horrible start, horrible goaltending. Gustafsson has been playing much better of late. Their overall team has been playing much better. Brock Faber has obviously risen to the occasion. They've had Brodin and Spurgeon out for long stretches. And since that start, when they were playing like 35% points percentage, they're back up to over 500. And I think that's going to continue. They're going to finish in the mid-90s. Montreal, I think, is kind of bad. Just lost 3 straight out of the Christmas break. I think the wheels are going to start coming off with them, and they still are rebuilding. It's not the end of the world. They're going to end up trading a lot of pieces at this deadline. Obviously, Sean Monahan's gone for the most part. I don't know why you'd sign him at like 29 years old, but Montreal is definitely better than these 3 teams, don't get me wrong, but I think we're starting to see the wheels kind of fall off, and they're going to finish around 70, 75 points, probably 75 points. Nashville's going to be in the mix. This got sparked. I remember saying it. They came back against Colorado. My goddamn Stanley Cup pick. They were down 1 with like 40 seconds left. Then they scored a goal to tie it. Then they scored another goal with like 5 seconds left to win it. That was a big turning point for them. Since then, I think there's something like 11-3-2, or they completely turned the season around. Saros is starting to play better. He was playing horrendous to start the season. You got guys like Forsberg on pace for goddamn 90 points. Ryan O'Reilly's looking like a legit number 1 center like 2 to 3 years ago. I think Nashville is going to be battling for a spot. They're going to be high 80s, low 90s at this point. Devils, I still think they safely make the playoffs. Again, similarly to Carolina, they're not playing quite as good as Carolina. They're a couple points back, but the goaltending has been so horrendous. I think it is only going to get better. I think this team will be going pretty heavily at the deadline because this is their chance to win. They need to be going. Obviously, the window is big with the New Jersey Devils, but a lot of their guys are pretty cost-controlled right now. So in looking at that, I can't see them not making the playoffs in the Eastern Conference. Islanders battling for a spot, again, similar to last year. They're going to be Thank God for the loser point this season, but they're going to be fighting at that 91, 92, 93 point mark in order to make the playoffs. A lot more explosive of a team this year. Nelson, Dobson, Barzell, Horvat, all over 30 points in like 33 or 34 games. That's like, I remember I looked up some stat. That was on the Islanders broadcast. They said that was the first time through like 33 games, 4 guys had 30 points since 1986. This is the narrative about the Islanders being a boring team is not true this year. They're playing actually pretty high octane offense. The power play is going at like 25%. And a lot of their games are 1-score games that go into overtime. Islanders are a fun team. Islanders play fun hockey. Rangers, I hate to say it, but they are a contender. They just keep on churning. Panarin is playing like 2019, 2020 Artemi Panarin. And obviously you got Fox. The one thing that is a little bit concerning is Shesterkin's not playing to the levels that we're capable of. Jonathan Quick's kind of had to pick up the slack, but I still think Shesterkin is a top 5 goalie in the entire league. So I think they are a contender right now. Ottawa. Obviously, I thought safely make the playoffs before the season because I was an idiot. I think below average. I think under Jacques Martin, they're going to be around 50% points percentage, maybe 55%. They're not going to end up making the playoffs. It's too far gone. They're in too much of a hole, but I still think they are a pretty, on paper, they should be at least a below average team, not a bad team. Right now, in terms of the season went, they're definitely a bad team, but I think they're going to be much improved in the new year under new coaching. Flyers battling for a spot. I still don't think they make the playoffs, but they are at like goddamn 99-point pace right now, so I don't think they're going to fall off a cliff and end up worse than any of these teams based on the start. I still think they lack the overall top-end talent. They're actually a surprisingly deep team in terms of their forward core and defense core. It's a lot of second-liners, similar to the Kraken last year. It's a lot of solid second liners and solid like second pair defensemen, but they just have a lot of it. They basically have like 3 second lines that they throw out there, and obviously Carter Hart and Urson have been one of the better goalie tandems in the entire league this season, so they definitely surprised, but I think Briere's not going all in at the deadline to get this team into the playoffs, and I think they do lack the top-end talent to really make a late push in order to make the playoffs, but still have definitely far exceeded expectations as of right now. Penguins battling for a spot. They looked like they were dead in the water like before the Christmas break, but they come out of the Christmas break, get 4 massive points in 2 games against the Islanders. None of them go to overtime. They handily beat the Islanders and kind of shoot back up, 3-0 week, shoot back up into the playoff mix. Obviously, Dubas has to be all in for the most part with this current core after the Erik Karlsson trade, and I think they're going to be in the mix for a playoff spot. San Jose, not as bad as we thought. I think I made like my first version of this was like there was a different tier for the San Jose Sharks. They're not that bad. They're not much worse than the Blackhawks, if at all, but still a bad team. Seattle's on something like a 9-game point streak right now. They were in bad or definitely below average before, but they have really rallied around. Joey Decord is bowling out right now, so they've kind of risen out of that bad below average, and they're going to be battling in a spot. Would they be battling similarly to a Arizona? Would they be battling for a spot in the Eastern Conference? Probably not, but as of right now, they are. I think the St. Louis Blues are cooked. Very good start, but it's been kind of just a pretty downhill thing. Just a very uninspiring team, in my opinion. Jordan Binghamton just hasn't looked the same compared to the first couple weeks of the season. I could see them battling for a spot, but I think it's going to be like they'll be eliminated with 2 weeks to go. You know what I'm saying? They're going to finish with like 86, 87 points, but they're not the final week of the season. They're not actually going to be in the mix. Tampa, although I think they're not going to make the playoffs, they're definitely going to be in the mix. Like they're not that bad of a team. I don't know what they're going to do at the deadline, considering they don't have a first and a second this year. They don't have a first next year. I think they might kind of take the year off, but or in terms of like not going all in. But yeah, Leafs should safely make the playoffs. It's been pretty disappointing, but when looking at the Atlantic Division right now, I think they're going to get that third spot pretty easily locked up. When you look at the Detroit obvious fall off and Tampa's just not that good, I think they're going to pretty easily cruise to an Atlantic Division spot. Canucks safely make the playoffs, although the fantastic start, they've actually been able to not maintain the same success, but they've actually been able to stabilize pretty well as long as they play even 55% points percentage pace the rest of the way. That's going to get them to 100 goddamn points, so I think they should safely make the playoffs. Vegas, I feel like you kind of got to put them in. They've looked like shit ever since. Like they've been playing about 50% hockey since their like 7-0-1 start. So like kind of should be in safely making the playoffs. I got to have I don't like putting them there. I'm going to be honest. But you got to respect that they are the reigning Stanley Cup champs. Part of it, maybe they don't give a shit about the regular season anymore after winning the Stanley Cup hangover. But I think by playoff time, they're going to get it right and be a dangerous team. Capitals in the mix, starting a little bit to fall off compared to 2-3 weeks ago, but I still think this team, it's going to be very interesting to see what they do at the deadline. If Ovi can start cooking, maybe they can make the playoffs. Right now, I'd have them on the outside looking in, but definitely have proven at least a team in the mix as of right now. And then Winnipeg safely making the playoffs in terms of that central spot. I can't really see anybody. I think they might win the goddamn Central Division. That was in my last video, but I think they're definitely not going to fall out of the third spot in the Central. It would take the Coyotes, Nashville, or Minnesota to go on an absolute heater to get to the 102 points that I think that the Winnipeg Jets are at least going to get. So I think they're safely in a playoff spot. And here it is. It's pretty goddamn balanced. I have 6 contenders, 3 in the East, 3 in the West, bunch of teams, 7 teams making the playoffs. That makes sense. So I got 13 teams in the playoffs or contenders. I actually did a pretty good job with this. Let me know in the comments. What do you think about this video? Who do you think is going to end up making the playoffs from the battling for a playoff spot tier list? Do you think anybody in the below average can make the playoffs? I personally don't, and I'll be seeing you in the next one.